one side, you've got a little IRS regulation. On the other side, you had the First Amendment right to free speech, to freedom of assembly, in the pulpit of a church. Who do you think wins that?
Insights with Marcia. I'm so glad you're here. And if you think about it, drop us a like and subscribe to our channel. I have a fascinating guest today. He actually gets to spend time in the Oval Office from every now and then. And his name is Kelly Shackelford. He's an attorney and he's head of First Liberty. So you'll hear more about that shortly. But you were in the president's office on Friday, the 26th of June, 2026. And we're going to talk about everything that happened. It was a fascinating meeting, but it had to do with religious liberty. So let me ask you something. A couple of weeks ago, I had a pastor, Dennis, he likes to go by that, on the show. He grew up in communist, Soviet Union. They couldn't have Bibles. He became a Christian. When he got his first Bible, of course, he couldn't put it down. It's like, what a neat treat to be able to read it. And we as Americans, I've had a Bible sitting in my house the whole time. There's one in every hotel room. We're so used to it. So we think, religious freedom, we've always had it and it's always great. But I kind of think religious freedom has had its ebbs and flows. Mm-hmm. So where would you say we are today versus 50 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever you want to compare it to?
Well, what I would say is about a little over 50 years ago, things started to move downhill. Really, the beginnings of that on religious freedom is 1947 is a famous case called Everson. And they pulled in this concept, this phrase, separation of church and state, which wasn't in the Constitution. And that sort of started, you had the 60s and the 70s where there was all this sort of revolution, this sort of revolting against authority. And of course, that included, religion. And so you started having a lot of really bad decisions and when I say bad decisions, I'm not talking about it as a public policy matter. I'm saying that weren't really what the Constitution said. This is where the whole idea of the living, breathing Constitution, and you had the Warren Court and all these Supreme Courts who were considered more leftist, and more mainly they thought their job was to bring the Constitution into modern times. So they would push their values into it. Very unlike, for instance, a Justice Thomas now, who says, look, it's not about what I think is right. It's about what this law says.
Yeah.
And they would so the originalists, which is what the current court has a majority of, they think their job is to find the original meaning of the text. And you would think, well, isn't that what? No, it wasn't. It wasn't. For a long time, we had justices that didn't think that was really their job. They needed to bring it up. They needed to, they were almost like a mini legislature that was unelected. And so it led to a lot of bad decisions. But the good news is, since this new court has come in, it really started with Trump's first term when he appointed 3 justices.
Awesome.
And we had, for the first time, really, a majority of justices who thought their job was to find the original meaning of the text. And when you do that on religious freedom, it starts to take you back to what the founders really put in place on religious freedom. So as a result of that, and this is going to be a strong statement, but it's true, every American alive right now has more religious freedom than they've ever had in their lifetime.
Wow.
And it wasn't that way for a long time. And it's cases like the Kennedy case at the Supreme Court, the coach who was fired for going to a knee. It's the Groff case, which is about religious freedom in the workplace. It's about the Carson case, which is about religious freedom for like Christian or religious schools and parents to pick the school. You can't have a school choice program and say, but you can't pick the religious schools. So when you start adding all these things up, really things have opened up much more back towards what the founders really wanted, which was free, vibrant religious freedom.
Yes, that's exciting.
Yes, it's as a guy who spent my life doing this, it's really exciting.
It's like finally.
Yes.
How many years have you been doing this?
37 years.
37 years. Yeah, I bet you're very excited.
And there's more. We've got 6 cases sitting at the Supreme Court right now. We don't know which ones they'll take. We've had now cases, just 11 cases in the last 8 years at the Supreme Court, and all religious freedom, because that's all we do. And we're 11-0, and it just tells you the arc of where things are going right now. And it's a good thing for the country, because religious freedom, our founders called it our first freedom, because I understood if you lose that freedom, you will lose every other freedom.
Yes.
And so whatever you care about, whether you're religious or not, this is really important to you.
That was a question I was going to ask you, because I remember thinking about, well, what if you were an atheist? I think even an atheist wants first liberty. And how does that work?
Well, I'll give you an example. I do this all the time where I'm speaking around the country. I'll have somebody come up to me afterwards. I'm thinking right now of a guy, his name is Peter. And he came up, he said, look, I'm not a person of faith. I don't have the beliefs you have. He said, but I believe that what you're doing is the most important thing that anybody's doing in this country. He said, I came from Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
He said, I watched them take down the religious symbols and replace them with government symbols. And within months, we all lost our political freedoms. And he said, so I'm going to be supporting you guys as a nonprofit from now on. Gave me a check for $5,000.
Wow.
And every few months, Peter sends in a check. And he's not religious.
Yeah.
He just understands he wants free speech. He wants, and people will say, well, why is that the case? And there's a lot of ways I can describe, but the easiest way for people to understand is the one thing that a totalitarian regime will never allow are citizens who hold an allegiance to one higher than the government. The government is God.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't have these people. And so that's always the first flashpoint when you have this sort of coalescing of power.
Yeah.
And if you lose there, you think if they won't let you pray, that they're going to let you, criticize the political leaders or engage in free speech or own your own property, or they're not. And so this has always been sort of the precipice of all the other freedoms. And it's why the founders put it in the first 2 clauses of the First Amendment, why they called it our first freedom. So it's something to watch, no matter what your faith is or no faith at all.
Yeah, it's highly, highly important.
Mm-hmm.
For a year, you were involved with the Religious Liberty Commission. It met 7 different times. I got to go. Thank you for your invitation. I got to go to the one here in Dallas. Fascinating.
Oh, yes.
My friend Diane and I went, and we were just glued. I took videos and everything. Was very fascinating. All kinds of witnesses. And so at each one of these meetings, there were citizen witnesses saying, this is where I feel like my freedom was violated.
Yes.
And y'all took notes and did all that. And our Texas Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, got to head it off. But how did Dan even think about this? Tell me, it's a great story.
It is. I was actually just on Dan's podcast.
Good.
It's, I think it's airing a week later or whatever, and he told a little bit of this story too. So it's not like I'm
You're
spilling the beans.
Anything.
What happened is the president called Dan at 3 a.m. in the morning. Now, number one, who answers their phone at 3 a.m., right?
Mine didn't even ring. It won't ring.
Well, Dan answered, said, yes, Mr. President. And he said, Dan, did you call me? And he said, no. He said, but now that I got you on the phone, I've been thinking about this idea of maybe doing a religious liberty commission. And the president immediately said, I love that idea. And so that's kind of where it really started. And the president said, well, first I'll say what Dan said on the podcast. He said, the first person I called after this was you, Kelly. And he said to his audience, he said, if you'll watch every hearing, you'll see that Kelly Shackelford is sitting right next to me on the right. And Ben Carson is on the left. And so he was like, I needed a lawyer who has done this, and I needed Ben, his wisdom, his grace, and all that. And so the president did something that's never been done before. we've never had a religious liberty commission. And you say, well, what is it? Most commissions report to like an agency or Congress. And, you think of the Social Security Commission and these things typically go in a closet somewhere, right?
Yes.
That's
It's like, why
what's
do we bother?
so unique about this. Our charter is for us to communicate directly and only to the President of the United States.
Awesome.
Our recommendations on what we are asking him to do that will secure and advance religious freedom into the future. And so we've got a president who's not exactly known for inaction. So we've been holding hearings all over the country. The stories are just unbelievable. I mean, by the way, people can go online to the Department of Justice, just do Religious Liberty Commission. You can watch all the hearings. I mean, some of the testimony is it's just hard to believe.
It is.
And you saw the military one.
Yes.
But there's been so many others as well. And it's just great. But, when you hear all this and you're sitting there listening, it allows you to go, I see a common thread in what's causing a number of these things. And you come up with solutions.
Yes.
And that's why we were in the Oval Office, is to present the president our draft. We'll vote on a final version of it here very soon. But our draft on, here's our report from what we saw. It'll have snippets from the testimony. And then we said, and here's our recommendations. And I'll give one example, because you were sitting in that hearing. Reverend Franklin Graham, who's also on the commission, he doesn't say a lot.
He doesn't.
But when he
He's talked
speaks,
once.
he usually says something about Jesus. Okay? And in this one, we had a Navy SEAL testify. We had a big Navy SEALs case where they were trying to, under the Biden administration, they were trying to push out tens of thousands of our best people because they had religious objections to the vaccine. And it was a total violation of the law. There's federal law that protects them. We ended up winning that in court. Ended up saving, I don't know, anywhere from 20 to 50,000 military families that we would have lost.
Yeah.
Our best people. And the Navy SEALs were the tip of the spear. They were our lead people. And but the guy who came to testify was like many others who were shoved out before the lawsuit was final. So they couldn't be a part of the lawsuit. They were already out.
Oh,
And
rats.
so they talked about losing their pension, losing everything that they had. And these are people like this Navy SEAL. I mean, a lot of them have traumatic brain injury
Yes.
because they're close to explosives. They're in situations where they can't help it. I mean, they've given everything for our country. And the idea that we would strip everything away from them in
It's just
violation
totally
of their
not
faith.
right.
So this Franklin Graham at the end, he raised his hand, and Chairman Patrick says, "Yes, Reverend Graham, you can always speak." And he said, "I just want to know, Mr. Chairman, can we make a recommendation to make these guys whole?"
Yes.
And everybody in the room was shaking their head. Yes, we sure can. And if you look, not only is it in the recommendations, we have 12 kind of highlights that give people a feel if they don't want to read through the 200 pages.
Yeah.
One of them is making these guys whole, bringing them back. And the president can do that like that, right? I mean, he's the commander in chief.
Yeah.
And so you think about these types of things. I mean, this really impacts people's lives. It also sends a message to everyone. One of the reasons why the military, enlistment is just going way up is because they know they have a commander in chief who's going to take care of them and not discriminate against them, not push them out, and take away their benefits and things like this. So a good example of the hearing you were in and one that's in the final report. And I think that'll affect a lot of people who deserve to be made whole in these situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we interviewed one of your Navy SEALs, and what blows me away is even the fact that they were persecuted
Yes.
for that, like given lowly jobs, taken off active duty. And so I love the fact.
My favorite thing, Marcia, is every one of the SEALs we talked to that were our clients, they came to a moment where they had to sit down with their wives and say, we're about to lose everything. We're about to lose our pension. We're maybe going to be dishonorably discharged. They're talking about trying to make us pay back for all of our training, which is like over $1 million. They didn't have that money, right? But they had to tell their wives this. And the coolest thing to me was every one of their wives said, don't you violate your conscience. Don't you back down. And I
Wow.
was like, that, Navy SEALs is not just the Navy SEAL. It's
It's a lot.
their wife. They're tough hombres all the way
Yeah. Oh,
across. And
God.
they're great Americans. And
Yeah.
so it was a privilege to be able to stand with them. I'll tell you, when they found out about First Liberty, they were kind of at the end of their rope. They found out that they'd go to lawyers, and lawyers would say, "Oh, I can't beat the military. I can't win. I can't do your lawsuit."
Right.
And finally said, "Well, if you pay us enough, we'll do it." Right. And so they were literally in a meeting talking about selling all of their homes so they could afford a legal defense.
That's awful.
And then somebody found out about us. They reached out, and we came in and represented them. So after the
At no
victory,
cost.
no cost. After the victory, not probably. It's the most precious item we have been given ever, I think, and it's in our office. They gave us a paddle, which is kind of a thing with the Navy SEALs. It's wrapped in the American flag and the handle, um, and then pushed in, emblazoned in, is the Special Warfare Command coin, the Trident, the demolitions, and then there's a little plaque in the middle, and it said, "When everyone else asks us to sacrifice for them, you sacrifice for us." And I was like, you can't get a better gift than that.
No.
And so these are great guys. A lot of their friends were lying or creating false, vax cards and all this. And they said, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
These are people of truth, of honor, and who risk it all,
Yeah.
just like they did on the battlefield. They did it with their career and their families and their
Yeah.
lives, and just great people. So,
Didn't it affect the other branches of the military?
oh yeah, everybody, until our lawsuit, everybody had lost. I mean, all the different services, everybody was being thrown out. The law was being massively violated by the way they were doing this. And as soon as we got into federal court in Fort Worth, we immediately got an injunction because it was real clear. But everybody had lost. But as soon as we won that precedent, then people could file the lawsuit on behalf of the Marines, on behalf of the Air Force, and they cited the law and the constitutional analysis and everything, and everybody started to win.
Awesome.
And then by the time we were finished, we not only got a final judgment in their favor, but it ordered that the military go through all the records of everyone and clean their record from any of these negative comments because of their following their religious beliefs with regard to the vaccine mandate. So, and it was crazy. I mean, these are guys that you could probably put a vial of anything in them and it'd be dead in an hour. I mean, these are really great shape people.
Yeah.
And most people by the time all this happened anyway, already had immunity. It was just not an issue, but it was something that those who have faith traditions, then there's different ones, different beliefs. There's all kinds of reasons, but they all had sincere religious violations. They said, look, we'll work around it. We'll do whatever, but we can't violate our faith. And because of what they did, they saved us from really losing some of the most well-trained, our best people who've been fighting for our freedoms, and then we're trying to take theirs away.
Okay, you have to tell one more story. And it's about the dog tags and how many of the servicemen that had them, it really meant a lot to them to have them, and then they couldn't. So,
well, Kenny Vaughn is a great guy. He was a national ski champion, and you get nervous because it's kind of dangerous.
Yeah,
It's
you could die.
Yeah.
You know?
And his girlfriend at the time, now wife, gave him the idea of putting a scripture verse on like his boot and and around his wrist, and to kind of get over the fear.
Yeah.
And she did, and it really was meaningful to him. And so he came up with the idea of doing a dog tag. And some those in the military saw it, and they wanted them. And so he started a nonprofit to provide these dog tags. And it would say, like, Joshua 1:8, where God says, "Be strong and courageous. Fear not, I am with you," and all these type of things. And so it ended up being that there was hardly a single place in the military where people didn't have those dog tags.
Wow.
Because you think of people who serve, there are times they're scared.
Yeah.
There are times that they need something like that. And Kenny was just, there's people who died. President Bush talked about the dog tag, that, just all kinds of great stories. But the Biden administration sent them a letter and said, we're not going to let you provide these anymore. And again, they weren't forcing anything. They were just being made available to them unless you take the scripture verses off. And so Kenny was just floored.
Like you could say something else, but don't say a scripture.
That's right. And so we had to go into a lawsuit that lasted, a long time, really shut Kenny down for a long time of doing what his great ministry was. Yeah. The good news is he stood his ground, and we won. And the military, those serving, can now have the dog tags, and people throughout the service do. And Kenny, his ministry is called Shields of Strength, and it was such a great thing that people in law enforcement started getting them, and there are people all over the country now that have these scripture tags.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and it all started from Kenny's girlfriend giving him an idea in a ski championship. This jump.
I like that. Okay, so I'm starting to understand how it's a lot better today than it was 50 years ago. It's a lot better today than it was 6 years ago.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And people need to understand there's about 6,000, maybe 7,000 requests a year for the Supreme Court to take your case, and they took like 60 last year out of 6,000 to 7,000.
I hate to even think of what percent that is. What half of
it's like 1% or less.
Yeah.
And so for them to take your case is like the odds are not with you at all. So to have them take, 11 of our religious liberty cases, and we at one point we had 4 taken in the same 13 months of time, and we were like, this is not normal. And we knew something is changing. God is moving. God is opening doors that we cannot believe we're watching be opened. Yeah. And just victory, victory, victory in a lot of these cases of religious freedom. So it has been a really encouraging. I just think we're just the beginning of this. But, it's a lot of fun if you're in the religious freedom area to fight for religious freedom now, because you got justices who actually believe in the First Amendment and religious freedom, and they're going to protect it.
Yeah. So I think the most awesome part of what came of this, y'all's recommendations, is now if somebody says, like, you got to have the vaccine, you can't have the dog tag or whatever, the burden of proof is now on the accuser. So would you explain that?
Yeah, and one of the things that came out a lot in the testimony was people would be persecuted. And when they would tell their story, it would be because some government official said to him, violation of separation of church and state. And obviously, whoever said these things had no idea what they were talking about.
No.
Number one, the words separation of church and state are not in the Constitution. Number two, people don't even know what it means. It really was Thomas Jefferson had written a letter because you had people under the new republic that we had wondering if their religious freedom as a church, as a synagogue, as a house of worship was going to be infringed and taken away, where the government was going to put its thumb on the scale in favor of one denomination over the other. And Thomas Jefferson responded, no, we're going to have this wall of separation. What he was saying was, by the way, this is like over 10 years after the Constitution and the First Amendment were passed. So it had nothing to do with the passing of that. Yeah. But he was trying to let people know that you're going to have free exercise. The government's not going to interfere. We're not going to have a national church. Right.
So they had all come from England and were used to that that could get in, the Church of England could get in their business.
Yes. Okay. And that's what he was talking about. And look, I don't know anybody in the United States who wants there to be a church of whatever in the United States, right? And it's really not an issue. We're so diverse in that. But what people will do is they'll take that term and they'll totally misapply it to say, well, you can't have religion around government. And the founders would have said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. They had a chaplain open up their legislative session. They paid the chaplain out of the treasury. Okay.
Wow.
I mean, we could just go through lots of examples of this, but again, that's when you're moving away from church and state to religion around government. Well,
Yeah.
if you say religion can't be anywhere that government is, well, government's everywhere. It's
Yeah.
just a way that would push religious freedom into the
Absolutely.
corners of society.
Or
And
out
so,
of society. Yeah.
so that's why in the report we said, look, anytime some government official says, I'm going to take this action against you because you're violating separation of church and state, we said within 30 days, they should be required to say where it is what they're complaining about is in the Constitution. So, well, number one, what they're going to realize is, oh my gosh, this isn't in the Constitution.
I had to read it finally.
And then number two, they're going to look at the two religion clauses and go, well, is this an establishment of religion, like an established church or whatever? Number two is, wait, I might be violating their free exercise. And I think that was one of the common things that you had the first maybe couple in the report were the recommendations that we gave the president in the Oval Office was there's just a lack of education, and the Department of Justice and the different agencies need to just educate people, especially in the schools, but a lot of places, in hospitals, the rights of conscience of healthcare workers. There's a lot of these things where they just don't know that the law is actually on their side.
Yeah.
And that this sort of hostility to religion that comes from a misunderstanding of separation of church and state has never been the law. And it's certainly not, if you look at all the recent decisions, they're very clear on this. And so that education, I think, is really one of the first things, because when people realize they have the freedoms, then they're more bold. And then other people realize, oh, I don't want to do that. That's a violation of the law. But for 50 years, they've been confused. And this is what's leading to so many of the people who testified as to what happened to them.
Yeah. I know at times in my life, but not now. I've been more of a rule follower now. I'm just like, I don't have to follow every rule. I'm just going to enjoy my life and not be so rigid. But I remember thinking, oh, there's a separation of church and state. Oh, well, it's almost like an obligation. You would think, oh, no, we have to keep it separate. And then I found out otherwise, and I was like, oh. So would you tell them the example? Is it Marisol?
Marisol Castro?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great example of what we're talking about. Marisol, Hispanic, 30 years a teacher in elementary and middle school, and she's a teacher in Connecticut. And there's a bulletin board behind them, and you can put your personal things up there.
So like, here's her desk, and there's a bulletin board.
Yes.
Okay,
and
her
it's
space.
Like Yankees pennants are up there a lot because it's Connecticut.
Yeah.
The Yodas, you could put a little gay flag insignia. You can do whatever you want. But she has a little cross, a crucifix. And again, she's been, teaching for a long time. She loves the kids. Well, her principal and head of HR come in and say, you got to take this down immediately. And they're like, well, otherwise we're going to fire you, take away your pension, everything for your life, right?
Oh my gosh.
Well, she's terrified. She's not used to having this kind of a situation.
No.
So they end up saying, I tell you what, we'll let you put it under your desk where no one can see it.
Oh, wow.
So she does. And she goes home. And as she said, she's got a very thick Hispanic accent. She said, I started crying, weeping. And she said, Papa God, I did wrong. And I'm going to fix it. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to fix it.
Wow.
And she went back to school. She put the cross back up on her bulletin board, and they walked her out like she was a criminal with all of her stuff in a box. And now they put her into a back room. She's not allowed to teach the children anymore. And so we've had to go into federal court. And she was the one that begged. She said they said to her things like separation of church and state stuff, nothing about what the real law is, like what the Constitution says, what the cases say. And we're having to fight for whether you can fire teachers because they have a cross.
I bet you if they had Buddha back there, that wouldn't be challenged.
And the thing about this is so bizarre is just a few years earlier, we'd already had the Coach Kennedy case at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes.
Where he's out there, all he did is after the game, he went out by himself, went to a knee and prayed, thank God for the privilege of coaching those young men, and they fired him. And part of their argument is, well, the kids might see him praying. So, so what?
Right.
They might see him engaging in free speech. They might, somehow it's okay if you have the person that's a man that's dressed like a woman, and that's okay.
And
But
teaching your class.
yeah, but you can't have this guy go off by himself and pray. Well, the Supreme Court obliterated that. It just said that's ridiculous. This is a violation of free speech. It's a violation of his free exercise. So think about that. That precedent has been handed down, and then they do to Marisol Castro now what they're doing to her.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, it's hard to understand, why they do this, but sometimes it's hostilities. It's just anti-religion, but a lot of times it's just complete ignorance and fear. And usually it goes back to that, well, separation of church and state. They have no idea what that means. They don't know it's not in the Constitution. And they just do crazy things that violate people's rights.
So are part of the recommendations from the committee to educate people?
Yes. And it's in ways that are more obvious. Putting posters up. You think we used to have that in the workplace about what your rights are as an employee or whatever. Well, hospitals should have these things. Well, what are the rights of patients? What are the rights? Because we had people testifying they were being forced to not being told, brought in, maybe they're a strong Catholic, brought in, and all of a sudden the nurse is supposed to assist on the abortion. And, that you don't have to do that or lose your job, which is what they're told. So there are all these rights that people do have, but they don't know. And if they don't know, they can kind of be forced to do things that violate their faith, and they can be fired even. But I think both their people who are their supervisors and they would benefit by people just knowing that they do have protections, they do have freedoms, and especially in the schools, I think. Parental rights. Most schools do not understand parental rights. They don't understand student rights. They don't understand the rights of the teachers. The case we have that's probably gotten a lot of press because, number one, our client, the little 11-year-old boy, testified at the commission, and it was one of the most powerful testimonies you've ever seen in your life. It's only 35 seconds long, but this is basically what happened was, not basically, they forced all the fifth graders in this school to read a book called My Shadow is Pink, pushing gender ideology on kindergartners.
Wow.
And so, a number of the kids were like, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And they went home and told their parents. Parents went to the school and said, number one, you need to notify us if you're going to do something like this.
Totally.
But number two, our child needs a religious exemption. And the school's response was, you have no right to be notified, and we're not giving religious exemptions. So we're going to force your child to violate their faith and their conscience and corrupt a 5-year-old kid.
What a good lesson a school is providing, right?
And now this is in California where you'd think, Democrat, judge, all this stuff, maybe they're going to have trouble. The judge said this is a violation of the Constitution, that you do have to notify parents. You do have to provide a religious exemption. And so we were having the hearing at the Religious Liberty Commission, and it was a day that the president showed up, and there were 12 people scheduled to testify. And the president says, Shay, why don't you come up and tell
So he
your
wasn't
story?
scheduled to testify?
No, I mean, he was going to testify with his mom. They were going to sit together, right? He calls it. So little Shay walks up. You got the presidential podium with the seal on the front, which you're not supposed to be behind.
Right,
But, and he's so small that he couldn't see. So they had to bring a stool around and put him on the stool. And he gives the most incredible 35-second speech you've ever heard in your life.
Now, that would be a good one for people to go look up.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Look at, Fox grabbed it immediately, and it was seen by millions at that time, just that day as a news item.
Good.
But it's an example of what people are going through that you're like, is that really happening?
Yeah.
And it is. And you know what? It shouldn't be. The law is very clear on this. I mean, in our country, our children are not children of the state.
No.
The parents
But they
are
are
the
in
authority.
communist countries.
Yes.
And socialistic countries.
That's the key.
Yeah.
And so understanding that, because some of these schools feel like, well, they're our children. Well, ultimately, no, they're not. They're their parents' children. And if the parents say this violates our faith, it's not really your business to say, well, I don't agree with your faith.
Yeah.
Okay. You do not have that authority. And so those basic things, you got to notify parents if you're going to go into with little kids into these kind of things, because they're the ones, the way the cases read, the parents have the fundamental rights to direct the upbringing and the education of their children.
Totally.
And not government officials. So that's a clean, if you just educated some school districts, a number of them, in fact, we had testimony, not only were violating the parental rights, they were transitioning their children and telling everybody not to tell the parents.
Oh my gosh.
And it was horrible, the stories you saw there. Of course, we had a client actually who they did this to her child. And really, the child had depression and some of those things. And she had gone to the school and said, hey, I'd like to work together on this because, she's got issues here and we're working on these. They, behind the mother's back, said, well, her real problem is she needs to be a boy. And she ends up committing suicide. This is what happens when the government comes in and interferes between a parent and their child. So these, and that's in our report, the testimony of a number of these people, as well as the recommendations.
Yeah.
So education could stop a lot of this. Now, some people, they don't care. They don't care what the law is. They're going to violate the law, and those people should suffer the consequences. But I think most people, they just are confused and they're scared and they don't know what the law is. And if they knew, they would preserve people's religious freedom, their parental rights, and school would be a lot better than pushing agendas on little children.
Yeah. So where's the Johnson Amendment right now? What's up with that?
Well, the Johnson Amendment is, to go back for those in Texas, it's, basically what happened is while he was,
Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Yes. While he was president, he didn't like, or actually I think it was while he was, before he was in the presidential office, he had gotten criticized by a nonprofit. And it wasn't a religious nonprofit, it was just a nonprofit. And so he stuck in to a bill, and there was really no discussion about it. So nobody even knew they were doing anything, that nonprofits shouldn't be able to be involved in politics. And so now, okay, if you want to do that, if you want to say, hey, these nonprofits are getting a write-off and they're not being charged taxes and all that, so they really should stay out of politics and endorsing candidates and things like that. Okay. He never thought, I guarantee you, that nonprofits would include churches. Because now, if you apply that, you got the government telling churches what they can say in their own pulpit.
Right.
Which, let's compare. On one side, you've got a little IRS regulation. On the other side, you have the First Amendment right to free speech, to free exercise, to freedom of assembly in the pulpit of a church. Who do you think wins that? And so, but the problem is the IRS will come and send a threatening letter. We've had lots of church clients, and we immediately send a letter back and say, let's go to court. And they immediately, they drop it. They do not want a decision because they know they will lose.
And
so
everybody will know.
That's right. So they use this to cause fear, and you have all these churches and pastors that think they can't talk about things. Of course, as there's a local pastor here that said it really well. He said, he was in his sermon, and he said, people tell me I shouldn't talk about these things. He said, I'm not the one who jumped the fence. We're not talking about cleaning streets. We're talking about the definition of marriage. We're talking about all kinds of moral, biblical issues. They jumped in my lane. I didn't jump in their lane.
Good.
And so, yes, pastors and churches and houses of worship and religious, they have every right to talk about the moral issues of the day and to say what's right or wrong from their opinion.
That's kind of where we go to learn and get our help.
And if you go back to the founding, there were election sermons before every election by the pastors. That goes back to our founding. So that's always been with us. So where we are right now, we have this law, which is there and being used to scare people. And so in the commission, we're saying repeal the Johnson Amendment. The problem is that's very hard to do because you have to get 60 votes in the Senate. You know how hard it is to pass any legislation. Yeah. So one of the proposals I had was we're going to ask the president to order the Department of Justice and the IRS to issue a small fine to a church for talking about politics in the pulpit, and then to not back down until there is a decision by a federal judge on whether the IRS has stronger rights than the First Amendment right to free speech, free exercise, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship.
I like that.
And then we get a decision.
Yeah.
And we should have a
Enforcing
decision.
it. Yeah.
You've got this law on the books. If they're not going to change the law, which they might not, let's get a decision. Let's force a decision so we can know what the Constitution really says. Now, I think it's very obvious, but that would then take care of this issue for every future president. And that's one of the things about this Religious Liberty Commission. A lot of these things might be things that President Trump can do now, but maybe the next person takes them away. And so things like this that will last, I think are really important and would help people way into the future. So anyway, the Oval Office was a neat, it's a neat place to be. It's such a special piece of ground in America. And then you got the President Trump stuff around it that is fairly entertaining. You had the Presidential Hall of Fame.
Really?
Yes. You see, in the Rose Garden, they have redone some of the Rose Garden. Number one, in the back of the Rose Garden, there's a floor now, which is great because it just used to be grass. And in the back now, there are some beautiful, beautiful statues that are being loaned by Harlan Crow. And there's one in the middle of the back that is spectacular. It's the Revolutionary War, and it's one of our people moving with the flag in the air, and behind him, pointing the other direction, is another soldier with a bayonet. And it's just spectacular. But then there's a walkway down the side of the Rose Garden all the way into the White House, and it says Presidential Hall of Fame, I think is what it's called. And he goes through the presidents, and there's a picture of each president. Goes along, and there's a description underneath of great things they did. And again, this is just so Donald Trump. And then, of course, the last one is him, but the next to last one is not a picture. It's the one for Biden. It's a picture of an auto pen, and it says Biden underneath it. And you go, well, this is obviously Trump's White House. You walk through the White House, you see him, the mugshot of him in a big picture frame there. So he's definitely
got a sense of humor.
He's made it his own, and it's different from anything, but it's a special place. And to be in the Roosevelt Room before going into the Oval Office is pretty special. And again, the people I'm on the commission with are just, Ben Carson, Dr. Phil.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And just they're such great people. Cardinal Dolan, Bishop Barron. So we've got a lot of different perspectives on there, but everybody's for religious freedom and worked really hard. And the neat thing is the president announced that he was extending the commission another year because when we have these recommendations, we were concerned that the deep state or whoever would not follow through on these.
Right.
And so we are going to be around to make sure, because he's about getting things done.
Yeah.
But he can't watch everything.
No.
So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to make sure that all these recommendations get implemented.
That's fantastic. And I wouldn't put it past him to extend it another year after that. That's awesome. So tell our audience your website. Let me ask you this question. I bet if there was a church that got one of those letters and they didn't back down, you would love to take their case.
Oh, yeah. We represent everybody free of charge.
Yeah.
The whole purpose with First Liberty is the average person, the average church, the average whatever, doesn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to go, let's say we've got one of our cases, which is typical, is a little girl in kindergarten told she can't pray over a meal. What are they supposed to do? Right? So we come in, we bring the best litigators in the country. They all donate their time so that when Gabriella wins her case, it's not just a win for Gabriella, it's really a precedent that protects everybody else. So we're here to provide that to people. And if people need help, they call us, and we're even just talking to people and answering their questions and helping them understand their rights. Because a lot of people are scared. And whether it's in the workplace or whether it's a church or whether you name the situation, whether it's in the military, I mean, we have experts in that area. We have a lot of veterans in our organization, including the top military lawyers in the country. So we can handle all these situations and help people because we want to keep what the founders put in place. And so the easiest way for people to get a hold of us is just go to, you spell it out, firstliberty.org. And the thing I would encourage people the most is if they'll scan down just a little bit on the page, it says Be an Insider. You can get an email every week, and it will tell you, here's what's happening. And there's a lot of things going on, but we'll take the 4 or 5 biggest things of the week, and we will let you know. And I like that because, number one, I want people praying.
Yeah.
If we're in the Supreme Court with Coach Kennedy, I want people praying for us, right? Number two, though, I want people to get this information and go, this one story is really going to speak to my friends, this victory. And they'll send that out every once in a while. And the more people get knowledge, the more bold they get, and the more they live out their rights. And so everybody that's watching this can help their friend. They can be sort of the Paul or Paula Revere, and really let everybody know what's going on and encourage them and strengthen them so we can be the America we're supposed to be.
Awesome. I love it. And they take donations. So you guys think about it. I can't think of a better place to give to. Well, I hope you'll be back again next time something cool happens, which is really all the time with you guys. And we'll discuss it. So thank you so much for being here. Y'all go check out the Religious Liberty Commission. See what they talked about. Watch some of the videos. They were quite fascinating, and you're going to learn a lot. And be with us next time for Insights with Marcia.